Very good evening from Sri Lanka and welcome to Appendix family, another session that is going to be very interesting, very informative and very educative. And for all the other friends and our colleagues who are joining from other parts of the world, good morning and good afternoon. So indeed, it's such a wonderful platform today, having seen the panelists. So to start with our webinar for the day, may I now invite our chairman, Mr. Bandula Igodage, to share his expressions and wishes for us. Chairman, over to you.
Thank you, Kaushali. Good evening, good morning. Those who are international viewers and all the people from APIT. APIT means Asia Pacific Institute of Information and Technology. So first of all, very big thank you goes to Professor Malcom McDonald. In spite of busy schedule, today you are with us as the guest appearance. So thank you very much for your presence and being with us. Then I would like to mention Dr. Roger Livermore, President of AIT School, Thailand, and of course, followed by Fiona Juransi and Hema's Marketing Director, and my colleague, Senior Vice President, Nestle's Maksud Mirasaibu, for joining us today's important event that taking place with APIT. This is the great initiative done by Dr. Rohanta Tukorala, on behalf of our CEO, Mr. Roshan Egodege, and the Board of Directors, and the teachers, entire student population, very warmly welcome you for this this great event. For your information, sir, APIT in Sri Lanka known as quality education for over 2 decades. We have a very strong, bond with the collective universities and with the people and with the society for over 2 decades. So now what we are trying to do is basically APIT expecting the education excellence, that is as the primary. The secondary thing is we want to build all our students when they are passing out the real leaders for the society. So this is one plus thing. So that is why Dr. Rohanta has come out with this great initiative to have the direct interaction with our student population, for them to experience people like you, like opinion leaders and the great marketing guys. So actually, if you really look at, we have the very strong building up. We have very strong relationship with, again, AIT in Thailand, and we have a UK presence, and we are really multi-national approach that we are giving, and the total exposure we are giving for our people. It's a great opportunity, and it's a very high value things. And the topic was basically do the basics right. You may all agree where we are lost is basically we lost basics even during the pandemic. I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting discussion, and it is going to be a really value-added program for all my students. Thank you very much for the great participation, great support, and your time for the benefit of my student platform and also the teachers and the staff. So without doing overdue, I would like to hand over while thanking Dr. Rohanta and Kaushali for the great things that you are doing to take up from me. Thank you very much for your presence again.
Thank you very much, Chairman. May I now invite Stefan Marias, Chairman of 3W, to share your wishes and expressions. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Kaushali. I hope I'm audible to the audience, and very good evening. Very good evening to all the Sri Lankan delegates, and also a good day to all delegates joining from overseas. So we are very proud and honored to present Professor Malcom McDonald on this program, Getting the Basics Right. Professor Malcom McDonald has, from his Malcom Economy, has partnered with 3W Group, and we are very interestedly marketing his services down in Sri Lanka, and not only in terms of Machel's time, but also in terms of the e-learning products that Malcom has created over the years. So I think we may not have time to discuss it today, but there's a large amount of e-learning products that Malcom has created over the years, and we would like to take them to the market, and that's our interest at the moment. And we'd like to introduce you as we go forward. The 3W Group has been trading for the last 24 years. We have worked with over 1,000 clients across 9 countries. We got an office in the Middle East. We got an office here. We are essentially a transformation consulting business. We work with industry-based initiatives We worked with blue chip companies. We worked with conglomerates, you name it, we have worked with them. I see Fiona from HEMAS, we've been involved in some projects sometime back with HEMAS. Coming back, what we've been doing is we also in the digital space, we are digital enabling organizations. We have at least about 15 platforms that we work with. Apart from that, we have a business called 3WG, where we are in retail consulting when it comes to education. So we represent about 1,000 universities globally, 300 directly and about 700 indirectly. Also, we have an academic space, which is very customized. So that's what we do very shortly, in terms of a time given to me. What I'd like to do is introduce Professor Malcom McDonald, and in the context of that, in a more humorous way, that the name McDonald has always been something that I have been associated with for a long time, because Professor, maybe you may not know it, but my father's name was also McDonald. So, but he had it as the first name and not his surname. So McDonald's have been around me, and I've been blessed to have McDonald's around. So thank you very much. And Professor, we know you're going to crack it. So over to you, Kaushali.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Indeed. Dr. Rohantha, it's all over to you to have this eminent panel being introduced and to take it further.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening. I think Steph, sincerely appreciate for partnering. I mean, been my friend for so long, and it's actually an honor for us to, partner each other again. And thank you very much for introducing Professor, a teacher of ours from CIM days. I yet remember studying so much of the books and theories that he has shared with us. So where we are today is because of him, and thank you, Professor. Let me just share. So today's panel consists of Dr. Roger Livermore, who is the president of the AIT School of Management. He's give his expert comments. And then we have Makshood Mir Bahu, who is the senior vice president marketing, food and beverage at Nestle Lanka PLC. Then we have Fiona Jurians Munasinghe, marketing director, HEMAS Consumer Brands. Both are outstanding in their profession. Work so much for multinational companies, grown brands over time, and they've actually served the Sri Lankan consumer so much. So it's actually an honor to have you in the panel. Professor McDonald was the professor for marketing and deputy director, Cranfield University School of Management, with special responsibilities for e-business, and now an emeritus professor at the university, as well as being an honorary professor for Warwick Business School. Malcom is a graduate in English language literature from Oxford University, in business studies from Bradford University Management Center, and has a PhD from Cranfield University. He has written over 50 books, including the bestseller Marketing Plans, How to Prepare Them, How to Use Them, and more than 100 articles and papers. Coming from a background of business, which includes a number of years as marketing director of Canada Dry, Malcom has successfully maintained a close link between academic rigor, commercial application. He has consulted to many major companies from UK, Europe, USA, Far East, Southeast Asia, Australasia, and Africa in the areas of strategic marketing and marketing planning, market segmentation, key account management, international marketing, and marketing accountability. Malcom is the chairman of Market to Win Limited, the Malcom McDonald Consulting Limited, and works with operating boards of the number of world's leading multinationals. I also like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Bharati, who heads management and a senior lecturer at the University of Staffordshire, who's also with us. And we also have the pleasure of having many ambassadors who have been on this panel, who's also listening to us. So Professor Malcom McDonald, over to you, sir.
Well, very difficult to follow that. Of all the introductions I've had, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of introductions over the past few years, can I tell you that your introduction is definitely the most recent. So thank you for that. And Let me warn you about the books, those who are listening. Once you put one of my books down, you just can't pick it up. So my wife tells me. Anyway, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Certainly, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, it's a great joy for me to be invited to your beautiful country. I'm giving this talk, obviously looking at a screen, but I'm giving this talk in Oxford, in the heart of England, and we're very lucky. The sun is shining, and we're not very used to seeing much of the sun, so we're going to make the most of it while it lasts. Thank you for the introduction. It saved me wittering on about myself. I'm also a professor at 6 of our top business schools, including Cranfield, places like Henley and Bradford. And I keep myself up to date by working with the operating boards of these fantastic companies and running research clubs at Cranfield University School of Management. So that's enough about me. And you can see what the title is. The title is Getting the Basics Right, which seems like a somewhat peculiar title for such an august audience. But let me tell you that when I go to most of the big companies and work at operating board level, what they always ask me to do is a session about getting back to the basics. Like yesterday, I had 40 chief executives of small, medium enterprises in the Midlands, and they were desperate for me to talk about getting the basics right. So what does getting the basics right really mean? Well, it means, to summarize it, building relationships that are great for customers, great for the people in your organization who build that value, great for all stakeholders, and great for the planet. Now, that's, it's easier said than done, but that is what I honestly think that getting back to basics is about. And I'll say it again, it's about building relationships that are great for your customers, great for the people in your company who create that value, great for all stakeholders, and great for the planet. And I'm going to expand on that topic during my half hour. And incidentally, congratulations to you for keeping to time so well. I've got half an hour, well, slightly less than half an hour now, and I promise not to go over the half hour that I've been allotted. Now, you'll see that this is Procter & Gamble. The point I want to make really is the crucial importance of intangible assets. You don't really see them properly on balance sheets for all sorts of perfectly legal accounting reasons. But if you look at this particular slide, it's Procter & Gamble. They paid 31 billion pounds, more than the gross domestic product of many nation states. They paid 31 billion pounds for Gillette, but they actually acquired only 4 billion pounds worth of tangible assets. And you'll see from the list what they were after. And indeed, I often tell a story about Nestle. When Nestle bought Roundtree's, the last thing they wanted was a factory in York. They wanted the brands and the relationships with markets and customers that go with those brands. So more about that later. Just to summarize this mini module, let me show you this slide. It shows that in the United Kingdom, 64% of all value is in intangible assets, and not a lot of it is shown on the balance sheet. In America, it's even higher. It's 73% of all value is in intangible assets. And I'm just making the point that those intangible assets are relationships with customers and markets represented through your brand. Now, this slide really says everything that I want to say during my short session. The last thing I want to say to anybody is don't concentrate on digital marketing. Indeed, I'm currently taking a digital marketing course myself because I understand how important it is. And it's very important that we in marketing understand blockchain, and augmented reality and predictive analysis and artificial intelligence and big data and the like. I'm not saying that is not the case. Of course, we have to address all of those issues. The point I'm making is that you cannot possibly have a digital strategy if you haven't got a proper business or marketing strategy for what you sell and who you sell it to, and why those customers should buy from us rather than from someone who's got something similar. And I want to, just to make this point even more seriously, I want to show you a mini case. Don't worry, I'll talk you through the figures. But if you look at profit and loss accounts, I mean, the world is awash with profit and loss accounts. Every board I ever go to, you know, the boardroom is awash with profit and loss accounts. And I want to tell you that, I don't know whether you've noticed, but on profit and loss accounts, there's usually one line for revenue, and then there's 986 for costs. And what does the board, generally speaking, spend its time doing? It spends its time looking at the costs. And that one line, revenue, it hides all kinds of sins and problems that companies have. And I want to show you the profit and loss account over a 5-year period of a company which I've disguised, called it Intertech, but you will see very briefly, if you look at the top line over the 5 years, the revenue, sales revenue doubled, the contribution doubled. If you look at the net profit line, that's in the middle of that slide, you'll see that net profit quadrupled. And wow, just imagine the applause that the chief executive would get when over a 4-year period you've quadrupled the net profit. Return on sales has doubled, asset turnover has gone up, as you can see, and at the bottom, return on assets, that's about tripled. So what a wonderful performance, except if you look at year 5, you'll see that it's beginning to get more difficult to get those fantastic increases in profitability. And the company had major problems on the horizon because the market, which had been a growth market, was beginning to decline. And so we put these figures to the board, and we looked back over the 5 years and showed what their performance was like when judged against the market performance. And as you can see, the market outgrew Intertech every single year for 5 years. So Intertech's market share dropped from 20% to less than 15%. On its own, that's not too bad. But if you look at this line, customer retention, I want to come back to that because they used to keep almost 90% of their customers every year. And if you look at the last line, year 5, you'll see they're now losing almost a third of their customer base every year. I'll come back to that in a minute. But if you look at things like dissatisfied customers through market research, up from 13% to nearly 20%. They used to have a fantastic product. It's now pimpy little me too. Their service is negative in the marketplace. Their relative new product sales are negative in the marketplace. But I'll come back to this, but let's have a look at this customer retention thing. What we did, we broke the market into 6 proper segments and did some analysis and looked at each of the segments. And you'll see the smallest segment, segment 6, which accounts for just over 10% of the market. But if you look just below it, it accounts for almost a quarter of industry profits. And then if you look at the purple circle, what you'll see is that is the defection rate. They were losing 35% of their customers in that segment every year. The best performance was in segment 3, which is the biggest of the lot, 27%, but only 14% of industry profits. And their best performance, which is still awful, 15%, was their best performance. Now that is truly, absolutely shocking. And the point I'm making, if we go back to this slide, what I wonder is, what on earth, and you go back to this one, that's wonderful, that's what the directors are looking at, but what on earth were the marketing people doing? Why weren't they presenting this kind of information to the board so they could get some sensible backcloth against their performance? And of course, the bottom line, and the reason I've called it a sad case, is because shortly afterwards, when the market did decline, They had to get rid of hundreds of thousands of people, and major problems befell the organization. So this stuff isn't theoretical claptrap. That's the financial stuff, that it needs to be explained in market terms. Now that's what I mean by getting back to basics. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is a sad statistic, but I get round to all of the conferences, obviously not over the past year, but conferences around the world, and particularly in London, where you get about 1,000 delegates, and we have an audience response system, and I ask them questions, silly questions like, how many of you do not have excellent products? And guess what? The answer is 0. How many have got excellent products? The answer is 100% of them. Then I ask them, how many of them actually measure and report on a regular basis the amount of customers that they have lost in any trading period? Because if you look at where it all started with Bain and Company, I think it was 93, but my academic colleagues will correct me. But look at Harvard Business Review, McKinsey, and lots of others. They're all unanimous that customer retention, with those customers that you want to keep, customer retention, if you can improve customer retention by 5%, it has a massive, up to 70% increase in your profits. And yet here we are in the year 2021, and organizations are not measuring basic things like that. So that's what I mean, amongst other things, it's what I mean about getting back to basics. And what are these basics? Well, I wouldn't bore an audience as august as this, but I can tell you I've got 127 scholarly references attesting to the fact that long-run financial success and excellent marketing, and incidentally, this is, as you can see, over 40 years, excellent strategies, understand markets in depth, as opposed to always talking about products. That's on the right. I mean, the test I give many boards, operating boards of directors, I start by saying, write down your key target markets in order of priority. And they want to write down their products. And I say, no, I want you to write down your key target markets in order of priority. And they have difficulty doing that. And then, of course, the second question is, against these key target markets, what are your company's sources of differential advantage? Now, if a board can't answer those questions, I think they need to be sacked or look for another job, for the simple reason that how does any organization make profit? It makes profit by selling something to somebody. You've got to understand the needs of whoever it is you're trying to sell to. You've got to understand the value they require. And of course, you have to create that value and measure the value that you are providing. Now, if you can't do that, then it makes me wonder what boards of directors spend their time doing. So one or two basics I've touched on there, but I'm going to go through some of these things fairly quickly, like understanding markets in depth. Let's just have a look at that one very quickly. Well, I'll just get this product thing out of the way. I've said all products today are excellent, and they are. I mean, the reason I use audience response systems in conferences around the world is because if you ask somebody a question, you'll only get an honest answer, a truly honest answer, if they can do it anonymously. And what I do know is that today, all products are excellent. All products and services are excellent. Of course, they're excellent. So you're not going to get much differentiation from having a good product, because we expect products and services to be good today. Now, world-class customer engagement, which is what I call it, is the bedrock of commercial success. That was what I said in my opening comments. And this is the point I want to make. Market segmentation is the bedrock of successful marketing. And I'll just expand on that in a few minutes. But let's pick this business of understanding your market in depth. Yesterday, I got these chief executives of these small companies, I got them to do a market map of their market, how their market works from end to end, all manufacturers or all suppliers and all users. And those figures, as you can see, top left, bottom right, it balances. And all markets today are quite complex, and there are different routes to market, different kind of buying groups, and so on and so forth. And when I showed this to this medical equipment company, they were not doing particularly well because their sales force, because of the technical nature of the product, were all technicians. And guess who they were calling on? They felt comfortable calling on technicians, but they didn't feel comfortable talking to administrators, buying groups, and so on and so forth. That led to a complete reappraisal of the role of not just marketing, but also the sales force and the skill sets that they required. So market mapping and understanding your market in depth is very, very important. Let's move on to market segmentation. Now, this one always makes me smile, even though it's my own slide. It says 20th century economics were based on the lunatic assumption that humans are rational. I just want to say, in my life, I have never, ever, ever met a rational person. And I'd love to, including buyers in business to business. They don't stop being people just because they're buyers in an organization. And I'll just add to this. I'll just quote you something from Thinking Fast and Slow. If anybody wants a good book that will really make you think, it's by, I think, Daniel Kahneman, and it's called Thinking Fast and Slow, 2016, fantastic book. And he said, our comforting conviction that the world makes sense rests on a secure foundation, our almost unlimited ability to ignore our ignorance. And I've got a wonderful, wonderful store of stories about engineers, about chief executives, about accountants, about all manner of people who, because none of us would claim that we aren't rational, but when you see their behavior, there is one in particular where a friend of mine, the most rational person I'd ever met in my life, he did a spreadsheet. He looked at 20 cars, got all the information for them. He scored them, weighted them, and it took him about 3 weeks of hard labor to work out a rank order of these cars from 1 to 20. And he confronted me one day and asked my advice. And I said, Tony, I said, buy the number 1 on the list, which was a Ford. And he said, not sure about that. I said, well, buy the number 2 on the list. He said, not sure about that. It was a Volvo. I said, well, buy the number 3 on the list. And he said, oh God, he said, this is difficult, Malcolm. And I said, come on, Tony. I said, let's stop the nonsense. I said, what car do you actually want? And he said, it's really, really difficult, Malcolm. He said, I quite fancy a BMW. And I said, you can't have a BMW, Tony. It's number 19 on your list. Now, guess what? Of course he went and bought a BMW. And then you wonder why so much market research is a waste of money, because you get some numpty turns up and asks him why he bought it. And just imagine the sort of nonsense you would get about associated corpuscular emissions per 0.0 gram of air, carrying ions, carrying one electrostatic quantity of electricity of either sign, and so on and so forth. So I just want to give you one little case study, case history, another one. This is a supplier of information systems, information technology. And I'm a sad person. I spend quite a lot of time looking at websites, and they amuse me enormously, websites. And business schools in particular, their websites, in my view, in most cases are a disgrace. They all talk about being AAA rated and so on and so forth. They're all exactly the same. Nobody cares about it. Nobody wants to know about it. But this one is what was on their website. And it's an IT company, information systems. And you've got it, FastPad family, multimedia for ads, PIX, firewall, gigabit, Ethernet, our chairperson for the day. I'm surprised she hasn't already rushed out, because she must be gagging for a bit of gigabit Ethernet. I mean, it's such a load of nonsense. Nobody cares about that stuff. And this is the point. This is, of course, students will recognize this as a perceptual map. It's not my role to say how you put them together today. But if you look at the 2 dimensions, business and technical, reward and relief, you'll see there are 9 segments of people. Save my budget, business general, save my career, conservative technocrat, technical idealist, radical architect, profit engineer, radical thinkers, business perfectionists. These people all behave differently. They all think differently. They might be buying the same piece of technology or piece of software, but they all need to be approached in a unique way. And it's easy, now we've got this fantastic internet information, it's easy to profile these kinds of people, understand their needs in depth, and communicate with them in a way that's going to make them want to deal with you. Not all of them, because no supplier could be brilliant at all 9 segments. But you would, presumably, you'd pick out, I think what this organization did, it picked 3 of them, and it was brilliant in dealing with those 3 segments. And I repeat what I said at the beginning of my session. Don't worry, I will finish on time. Can I just say that you'll see these are people, although they're in a business-to-business setting, they're human beings, and they don't stop being human beings just because they're in a business setting. And the best companies in the world, like General Electric and 3M and Siemens and DuPont, they're the sort of organizations, and of course the fast-moving consumer goods companies, who understand this and act on it in depth. So that's market segmentation, the key to success. And just again, without wishing to offend anyone, I've already mentioned it, don't ask customers stupid questions about what they want. People didn't ask Apple to invent iPods, iPads, easy music downloads and the like. It's just like all the best suppliers in the world. They invent ways of making life easier and more enjoyable for their customers without asking them stupid questions. Okay, summarizing this particular part of the session, if your segmentation is wrong, your targeting and positioning will always be wrong. So marketers who mistake stereotypes such as millennials for segments need a new job. And I think you'd find any self-respecting professor would say the same thing, because not in the universities that are listening to me now, but market segmentation is badly taught and badly written about in so many business schools and so many books, where they talk about silly things like socioeconomic groups, A, B, C1, C2, etc., demographics and geodemographics, a classification of regional neighborhoods. That's not segmentation, never has been. Take socioeconomics. If you take socioeconomic group A, Ozzy Osbourne, presumably some of you will have heard of Ozzy Osbourne, and Prince Charles are both socioeconomic group A, but I don't think they behave the same, and so on and so forth. So segmentation is worth following up and getting the basics right. Okay, moving on from there, this is a sort of a summary slide. I'm only going to focus on the two squares on the left. Investing in markets and customers that earn more than the cost of capital. You might be surprised, those of you who are listening, you might be surprised that my latest research has shown that so many marketers, a big chunk of marketers, don't actually even know what the cost of capital is in their organizations, which renders them totally and utterly useless, because it is the cost of capital, that hurdle, that drives everything in businesses. And then the one below, understanding the cost to serve different markets and customers. And the story that some of my colleagues have heard me tell frequently, when I was marketing and sales director of Canada Dry, we had, let's say, well, certainly 2 of our biggest customers were Sainsbury and Tesco. Many of you will have heard of those or read about them in the business press. But in those days, they used to take about 3 million dozen ginger ale each, and the discounts made the price about the same in both of those supermarket stores. The problem is that, unfortunately, Tesco insisted on daily just-in-time store-by-store delivery, which cost me a fortune in distribution costs. I had about 120 salespeople. They made them call on every store daily to do what was called merchandising in those days. And they took about, it was horrendous. They took about 90 to 100 days to pay their accounts, where Sainsbury, taking the same 3 million dozen, they said, keep your tacky lorries away from our lovely upmarket stores, just deliver them to our central warehouse. So it was one invoice, one lorry, absolutely wonderful. They said, keep your working class sales force away from my lovely upmarket store, so I could use them for more productive things. And they paid their accounts in about 35 days. And the point I'm making for those who are listening is, what is it that makes profit for a company? And the answer is, it isn't your product. It's the cost of dealing with your customers and your markets after the product has left the factory, in inverted commas. And yet, another sad fact about not getting the basics right, most accounting systems do product profitability. And what they do, they don't do account-based marketing. They don't do market and customer profitability. And when they do, and I work with a finance director, and we take, shall we say, the top 5 customers, and we do proper activity-based costing, we discover that what we thought was profitable, in fact, is losing us money. So we're not even measuring the right things. And again, this is what I mean, everybody, by getting the basics right. So this is my summary slide. I'm still in time, so please don't worry. Number 1, I mean, there are more than 6, but number 1, focus on the markets and customers you want to keep. That's the 80-20 rule, isn't it? It's Pareto's law, you know, or the Lerner's curve, whatever you want to call it. If you list your products and your product groups and your markets and your market groups, and you do some kind of analysis, you'll find, as you always have done and always will do, that it's 20% of them that deliver 80% of your revenue and profits. So once you've decided what that it's the right 20%, that's an important point, then I'm suggesting you focus on, I'm not suggesting you ignore the rest, I'm suggesting you focus on the right 20% of customers and markets. Understand the value required by customers and quantify it financially. You'll find, you heard some reference to our online courses. One of the online courses deals with this in depth, but McKinsey's research and my research shows that fewer than 5% of companies have financially quantified value propositions. I mean, that is, in the year 2021, that is an absolute disgrace. And those companies, the world leading companies, all have financially quantified value propositions, and price always disappears from the equation when they're talking to markets and customers. And remember, number 3, profit is the result of doing something customers value. I mean, if you look at 6, and I'll come back to 4, but look at 6. It's a poor company that makes only profit. And I say, you know, profit's a bit like a sausage. It's okay until you realize what goes into it. But there are some fantastic companies that do make profits, fantastic profits, and they do it by being ethically upright and not destroying the planet. Looking at 4, value is what customers need, not what you're trying to sell them. And this number 5, I've spent a lot of my life over the past year helping companies do this. Reduce costs in unproductive areas of the business. It's no good getting into this sort of slashing the costs mode. I call it anorexia industrialosa, an excessive desire to be leaner and fitter, leading to emaciation and eventually death. I'm not suggesting cost cutting hasn't been important, but it's got to be done sensibly in the right areas. And I hope I've given you some hint about what that is. So to summarize what I'm saying to you all, keep the heart of the business, key products, key markets, key customers, and above all, protect your brand. And just a thought again, coming back to what I said half an hour ago, well, almost half an hour ago, all of these 6 guidelines that I've just covered with you, they're represented by your brand. And that will lead to relationships that are great for customers, great for the people who make them happen, great for all stakeholders, and great for the planet. What in business could be more satisfying than achieving this? Great brands, and I hope you find this motivational, great brands will always shine bright and give us hope in the dark cloud of COVID-19. I've got one appendix, which I won't go through, I spent quite a lot of my time with my colleague Ed Bradford working on this 4 or 5 years ago. 10 questions that we know chief executives are asking their senior marketing people. These are the 10 questions, but one of our online courses also gives in detail the correct answers they should be receiving. So, final slide, or last but one slide. Just want to thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience. Here are my contact details for those who want to contact me. If I fail to insult anybody on this call, if you send me an email, I'll send you a personal insult back, I promise. But seriously, if you've got any questions that you don't particularly want to air in front of the panel, please send me an email and I'll do my best to answer it. And well, I think really that's probably it. So can I hand myself back, please, with apologies to the chair? And so I think I've been a good boy, and I think I've kept to my half hour. So,
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. And bravo. Thank you. So I'd like to just once again talk to our panel. Our panel is on. Can I start with Dr. Roger? Doc, would you like to share a few thoughts about what Professor mentioned?
Yes, so it's a good day to you, Malcolm. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Good day, Roger.
I'm the Dean of a School of Management here in Bangkok, where it has been raining cats and dogs today, like it has been in Sri Lanka the last couple of weeks. It's quite daunting following you, to be honest. I don't teach marketing, but I know your work and I know your reputation is immense, a very eminent scholar and practitioner, and a lot of kudos to Appit for having people like you on a weekly basis to give such insightful presentations. So when I listen to what you say, I think the beauty of these type of presentations is that you reflect on your own business model, your own business strategy, and you take some of those key points away and work out how can you do better yourself. So I've been at this institute, Asian Institute of Technology, for 2 years, and I would say that what I noticed when I first arrived was the defection rate of some of the customers over the last 5 or 6 years. And there are many factors for that. One of the factors may be the disgraceful nature of the business school website, which has been not particularly good. And this is part of maybe the social media that some business schools around the world need to improve in different ways in how they convey their message. So I hope that defection rate, it has changed. In fact, we've actually seen a big increase during the COVID time. And I think it's because partly we're getting some of the basics right, especially when it comes to market segmentation. And I'll give one 30-second example of that. When I first started here in Bangkok, I actually went to businesses and spoke to 100 business people and just asked them, what is it that business schools in this region are not delivering that you would like to see? And the answer they gave me was business analytics, digital transformation. There's no specific thing in this region around that topic area. And so that's what we built to try and fit something for the market. And it has been a success, and it has arrested that sort of slide in customer defection. And we've got a different type of market that's now coming to the business school here. So I really enjoyed that part of your presentation. I really enjoyed you talking about Ozzy Osbourne. It's been some time since I've heard Ozzy Osbourne's name. And I also think that the book you mentioned, Thinking Fast and Slow, this is an incredibly important book looking at bias in decision-making. So I'm not sure if this opinion has been particularly expert or rational for that matter, but I really enjoyed your presentation. And I would like to go through and link in with you afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Roger. I just did a little bit of research behind your back, and I got to know that you have turned around the AIT management faculty, School of Management around, and people were actually talking about how you have turned around the top line, and then of course you had also looked at the health of the brand in terms of the people and making sure the student satisfaction is coming in. So Very, very apt in terms of what Professor Malcom was saying. Can I move to Makshood? Makshood, I mean, we know that during the pandemic, consumers changed a lot in their behavior. You know, they went back to traditional researches. What Cantor research is saying that, you know, they went back to the traditional ways of doing things. They started, you know, looking at, you know, getting more health conscious. And I mean, I know that Nestle had an outstanding year. I mean, what we heard was that the last financial year is one of the best that Nestle had seen. I mean, how do you relate to what Professor was talking about, the health of the brands and the kind of changes you had to make to cater to the changing needs, so that you made sure that the organization was not just only financial driven? Your view.
Sure. So Rohan, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And Professor Malcom, it was such an honor to meet you, and really great in terms of your presentation, some valid points, because most of all, given the current pandemic and our day-to-day operations, we seldom get carried away with a lot of other things. But I think your point in terms of getting back to basics was a real eye-opener, and I think that's the bottom line truth. Rohanta, to answer to your question, I think, first of all, I think it was a tough year for all of us, and thankful that all of us are keeping well and safe during this crisis. Now, first of all, I think I would like to break your question into 2-3 points to answer. Number one, for example, I think resiliency of the team. And I'm really thankful to the Nestle team as well in terms of, I think, be it sales, factory, supply chain, they keep the flag flying high. Because given that there was a real issue in terms of health and safety, I think teams quickly coming together, I think that was the number one thing. So going back to relating to Professor Malcolm's key principles in terms of getting back to basic, doing the right thing, he pointed out 2 key aspects that I would like to talk about, which was the value creation and number one, getting back to the P&L management. I think if you really look at value creation, that was where I think number one, all the brands got together, and in terms of making sure that from a messaging point of view, understanding the insights, the transition of the behaviors, because it was all of a sudden, because if you remember, as a country, we've faced many challenges, many debacles, but we always came out resilient. And this was also something like, first we were in denial, then we were like, yes, it will come and hit us, but then we will get out of it really stronger. But there was a lot of uncertainty that crept in. In that scenario, and I think I would really like to thank my boss as well, because he really pushed us to get back to basics. Number one, in terms of making sure that our brands were relevant and available. Number two, this is where maybe one shift in terms of thinking from Professor Malcom, and that I would like to clarify is, Sri Lanka became it is a TV-driven traditional market, but then I think having a digital-first mindset was a big thing that we undertook, because curating the right messaging, curating the right aspect in terms of how the brand can serve during the pandemic or during the shift in terms of consumption was something that we really took to heart and were very agile. In fact, the digital transformation or digital-first mindset would have taken maybe another 5 years to happen. But given this pandemic, I think our teams and everyone had like a couple of weeks only to like really do, and it was a trial and testing method that came in. Now, having said that, I think the bigger realization was going back to really understanding the consumer shift, because if you really know, our market is a very traditional market. We love our rice and curry. We love the home cooked food. But I think over the last couple of years, we've really shifted towards the convenience, whatever comes our way, we'll eat kind of thing, and really not gone behind the right values that we really were brought up in. I think when that shift was happening, if you really realize brands such as what Nestle has, people were getting onto that. And I think that is where over the years, what we've communicating in terms of a single-minded message and rekindling that real value proposition really helped us is what I would really like to say at this point in time.
Fiona, are you around?
Hi, Rohanta. Yes.
Hi, Fiona.
Hi,
Fiona, I mean, I'm just throwing the same question that Makshud was talking about, going back to basics. I was listening the other day to the Cantor research that Himali was presenting, and they were saying how people have gone back to applying the oil on their face, not only on their head, but on their face, because there was time for them to do that because they're at home. So going back to what Professor was saying, we have seen it in reality in Sri Lanka, going back to basics. Would you like to share some on that one?
So firstly, thank you, Rohantha, and thank you, Professor. It was an honor to hear and be on the same screen with you, somebody of your caliber. So it's a real honor, and thank you, Rohantha, for the opportunity. Before I go into the marketing stuff, I would have to say that I would acknowledge what Makshud said, and I would bring another dimension to getting back to the basics. I think what COVID really showed us that it's really teamwork. It's really making sure that all the engines really pull together, because you can't even think of serving consumers if your supply chain and your sales engine is not working, for example. So a lot of the effort, I think, in this time was really, in inverted commas, getting back to basics on a lot of things. But to answer your specific question, Rohantha, it was a time, I think I'm glad again, I take from what the professor said about people not really being rational creatures. And I really agree. And Sri Lankans are even more emotional creatures, I would say, and very simple people. So sometimes we analyze a lot, but people are fundamentally similar. And especially in a time of uncertainty, I think you tend to go back to what you know. So there's a lot of comfort in what you know and the basics, which is why you saw people going back to what they knew and what is trusted. Because when the world around you is sort of, you don't know what's going to happen, then you cling more to, what you grew up with, what you remember, what is an anchor in your life. So that really served us well. Other than the basic stuff I'll talk about, which like sanitizers, which everyone did, a good insight we have is exactly what you said. We had seen the hair oil market decline for years. We were hearing young people say that, I don't really have time and I can't, it's like my mother, I'm not at home on Saturday morning to have this in my head for 4 hours. It smells, I can't go around, it makes my hair flat. So that's the sort of thing that we have been telling ourselves, decline in market. But you saw in this time, as you said, people had time. Not only did they have time, they know that these are good for them. So it was external factors, pace of life, that was really the barrier there. And we really saw, people taking that time to use natural stuff, which is good for them, and going back to basics. And exactly in that time, we launched just a few months ago, a new Kumarika therapy oil, which is the oil that actually comes in it's got a little comb in it. So it's very aspirational in the terms of looks. We are a Sri Lankan brand. We took the coconut oil, which is the trusted base. We threw in a few more aspirational ingredients because we knew that young people like that. So we had that nice blend, and we had it in an aspirational looking package in a way that was easy to use. So that is just one example of stuff we did. The other point was about empathy, and Professor alluded to it. It's not all about functionality. We live in a world where, we spend so much time talking about this fragrance, is your texture a little bit that way, and, consumer buys something that defies your logic. Or your own consumer will tell you they'll love you in a research, but you've got 2% market share. So something is, not right in that mix. So I think something else we really did is that we realized, again, as Professor said, that we are humans too. So if we are going through a change, the same way the consumer is going through a change. So how do you really step forward as a brand that they trust to provide that empathy for them? And you don't have the answers, but they don't want answers. But how can you be with them, as their life unveils? So you will find that, for example, on baby Sharami, very difficult to differentiate beyond the point on product. We were there really giving pregnant women tips very early in the pandemic on how to stay safe, how to keep your mind relaxed, because it's not only about physical safety. Especially when you're pregnant, it's so important to make sure that mentally that you're in a good place. So we did stuff like that. We launched Purpose on baby Sharami. I can't say it was triggered by pandemic. There was a lot of work behind it, but it was in the area of inclusive parenting, which was absolutely great timing because you found, fathers are at home and fathers are not geared to deal with babies Our culture tells us that you put the mother separate from the father for 3 months after the baby is born. But now you're finding that fathers had with them. They didn't know how to deal with it. The mothers didn't know how to deal with it, but they needed that help. So actually, there's a lot of stuff I would say that we did on the marketing front, even though you may not see it outside, to really speak to our consumers, be with them. And again, as Professor said, it's very important, especially when you're a strong brand, how do you retain your consumer? So how do you empathize with them? How do you make sure that they feel that you understand what they're going through and that you're a friend with them and a partner with them? So there are a few more examples, but I would say these are two of the key things. Also in terms of product, Baby Cerami came up with herbal soap during this time. We are a brand, the name suggests Baby Cerami is very European. We started 58 years ago when people thought European things were good in our country, right? But now you saw Baby Cerami doing herbal, very different look and feel. A lot of questions from people, can this brand actually carry that off? But we've launched it. We launched it with ingredients which people trusted. We also added in kohomba in there, which is a germ-killing ingredient which people really trusted. And it's really worked for us, and we don't see any dissonance. It doesn't sound right if you analyze it and theorize it too much. But consumers latched onto it, they liked it, and our safety parameters, our trust parameters have really gone up during this time. So I think it's a time of it's a reset button. So I think, brands and companies, we're still learning, we're struggling every day, we're challenging ourselves. There are so many things we've missed, honestly. So many things where you think, we've done it, but so have so many others. So, how are we different? But I think it's a reset. It's a time where we all have to challenge each other, and which is what we do every day, Rohanta. So we have some misses for sure, but I think, there have been some opportunities we've taken and they have strengthened the brands, definitely.
Thank you, Fiona. Maksud, before I throw a question to Professor, whilst Professor was saying that you have to be very financial savvy, but if you're going to make only money, you're a very poor company. My question to you, Maksud, is, we spend so much time with Kanta or with when Nielsen was there, when they do panel, we spend time understanding where the gains and losses are and what kind of consumption patterns are there against competitors. Now, given the pandemic, we know that we can't reach consumers. There are issues with regard to getting research. Now, how do you run brands when you know that there are issues and limitations when you have with data?
So interestingly, Rohanda, I think that is where a couple of points come into play. Are you closer to the market? So I think with the sales team's help, you have so many feet on street every day. So having a close touch with them, because maybe no disrespect to any research agency, but I think having that feedback coming in, more than 1,000, more than 2,000 people, and those would have a lot of validity. So having the courage to maybe speak to them, make sure that you are in close contact with them is number one. Number two, I think, like I was telling you, like we had a digital first mindset, learned a lot, got a lot of things wrong. There are, I think, a lot of the comments that were coming in. People, commented in terms of what they never did. They were at home watching TV, maybe worried about the pandemic, but there were a lot of comments and everything that was coming in. And then we ourselves realized, when we looked at the consumer journey, there were a lot of gaps. So if you really look at it, a lot of the feedback that was coming in, even from the respective teams, we were not listening. We wanted not the pandemic. Our day job was basically, we were doing something else. So if you really look at it, feet on street. Second thing is having the digital first mindset, getting a lot of feedback from a Facebook or from an Insta and like really understanding what them. And then the third thing is having our e-com partners also telling us in terms of some of the learnings that they had. Because normally being in FMCG, we said, okay, they do only FMCDs, durables and all, and they know something else. But to see at the end of the day, the purchaser, the consumer was the same. We were going to the same consumer in different routes. Having those three, no matter what came in. And the fourth thing is, I think teams coming together. Normally what happens is we would come to solve deadline issues and operational challenges. But this was the time where people came together and like we understood each of our principles. There were a lot of tacit knowledge in the system. And I still pride a lot, because this was a time normally where you would take a decision in one day, in a normal operational day. But here, discussions, alignments, it used to take several days. Sometimes you finalize the thing and we've changed it 3-4 times. I was always cognizant of the fact that the system had, because if you look at Nestle is a rich company, you have many stalwarts who are there. They have a lot of tacit knowledge. This was the time to tap into all that. So if you really look at it, me, my team, we had 3 to 4 good routes to really understand. And for me, I think while there were a lot of challenges and a lot of issues, every comment was taken very positively. Sometimes, some comments didn't make sense. And sometimes even I used to get a bit annoyed because, now I have to change everything. Agencies are working remote, not used to that. I have to change everything. I have to now look at it in a different way. But for me, I think all those feedback was really useful. And the difference was, normally everyone in a professional setup come and give a professional statement. But this time it was very different. They were there with their wives, kids running around during meetings, dogs barking, chunpan going from this way, that way. So to be honest, all the professionals were consumers this time as well. So every director, every VP, every manager, every executive really mattered a lot. And for example, Nestle has a great promotion arm. It's called the Sales Promotion Unit. They have over 25 years plus experience, great team, 150 guys. Normally, those guys are used to going out and sweating out in the field and making sure that the sales operation happens, promotion happens, and they reach more than 2 to 3 million consumers. Now, those guys never had the time to sit down and give us feedback. When the pandemic hit, they had nothing to do in terms of going and reaching consumers. So me and my team always used to interact with them, and those guys poured in a lot of rich, valuable insights. And they knew how Anuradhapura reacts, how Colombo reacts, how Gampa reacts, Jaffna reacts, Gaul reacts. So I think if you really look at it, we had a good reach of 4 to 5 parameters where we could tap into. And it came to a point where we were challenging all the research outcome as well. But now, since the panels are stable and all, there's a different topic altogether to deal with, but that's a different topic.
Thanks, Maksud. And there's a greeting coming from the ambassador of Singapore, mutual friend Sashikala says hi to you.
Hi, Sashi.
Fiona, before I turn to Professor, there was something very strange that happened last year, because consumer behavior changed so much that we are now seeing the behavior actually changing today. Like, for instance, people started using germ protection soaps. Normally they would have maybe 2 soaps for a month. They started going into 4 soaps for a month, because of pandemic. You had irrational kind of behavior happening. But now we see people going back to that old pattern of behavior. So when it came to budgeting time, you had a fantastic year last year. So if you were to put a 20% growth on that number, you're going to be down this year. You know what I'm saying? Because the behavior was very different what happened in the home last year. So people are then having to look at 2019 numbers and look at how you're going to predict the future of next year. So how do you handle this, or do you see this kind of changes that are happening where people are going back to pre-pandemic, kind of behavior? Your thought?
Just to clarify something, did you mean that last year was a good year for companies like us, or do you mean the opposite?
Very good year for companies who are in the FMCG, Fiona. The only thing was that the kind of behavior that we saw in our markets was not the real behavior, because it was, it is not the reality. You know what I'm saying? So now that we have gone out of lockdown and, and then we got back to the normal thing, we if you were going to extrapolate the number, we will not, it would have been unrealistic. You know what I'm saying? So how do you kind of, what is your reaction and how did you manage that?
So we've just started the year, but I think the challenge that's put to us, Rohantha, is we don't have 90% market share, right? We don't have 80 either. So there's still a lot of share out there. So the mindset that we are going into it, there are certain categories which we are participating, which we feel strongly that the demand will be robust. So as you mentioned, the basic cleansing category. So we operate in, shampoos, toothpaste, detergents. Those categories are definitely not going to go down. In certain cases, certain behaviors will actually probably, some of it will stay. So for example, hair oiling, even if you go back, goodness knows when, we know after 3 weeks, it becomes habitual. So even if it may not be twice a week, it may be over the weekend. Certain practices, like people used to hang up their clothes after they wear it 2-3 times. Now, you wear it for 5 minutes, it goes into the wash bin. I think a large extent of that is there to stay. So our philosophy has been to say that, we still got a lot of share to gain. There is opportunity in everything, even though it may look negative sometimes from the front. It depends how you look at it. So unless it's a 90% market share and you're struggling, there is opportunity. So how we are looking at it is be agile. Again, somebody said that before. In these times, nothing is set in stone. So I think we are giving ourselves leeway to try things. Right from the top, we've been given the license, try, some fail, but you try different things. But we are thinking big. I would say a year ago we were negative. So if you were to rewind 1 year ago, when we reprojected all our categories. So we were saying, pandemic, people won't have money, they're not going out. If they're not going out, why would they wash their hair? Certain categories like, we took drastic declines. Hair oil for one, we thought, but the opposite happens. So I think you keep an open mind. Sometimes the behavior is surprising. The fundamental reason, if you think about it, isn't. But I think there is opportunity, and we personally are being aggressive, trying new things and going for share. So we've got very, very tough, aggressive targets on the table, and they're aiming for that. And they're challenging ourselves every day. And our boss definitely challenges us every day. As Makshood said, we're meeting much more often now. So it used to be daily BCPs. Now it's, twice weekly. So there's much more opportunity for challenge and sharing than there ever was. So, yeah. Never a dull moment.
I was chatting with him last week, and we were having a nice laugh on that of meeting the team quite often. Professor Malcom, I love what you said. I have heard it sometime before. You said that marketing is the most interesting thing you can do with your clothes on, or when you're going to remove your clothes. And we saw the real light coming from Makshood and Fiona, how passionate this whole area of brand marketing is, and how close you have to understand what consumer behavior is coming. What made you say that statement, Professor?
So I'm sure I did say that, and I hope it was taken in the right spirit, the spirit in which it was intended. Indeed, I said the very same thing at the end of my 4-hour session yesterday with the chief execs of these small, medium enterprises. There's so much common sense and wisdom that I've heard over the past 25 minutes, half an hour from the panelists. Thank you very much indeed for that. I would only want to add one thing, and that is that I don't think human nature is going to change all that much. And I don't think that behavioral patterns are going to change all that much either. We've got all sorts of peculiarities happening at the moment, but underneath them all, I think we're going to get back to some normality. We're expecting to get back to normality in about 10 days' time, unless the government gets cold feet and postpones it yet again. But the one thing